Well, good morning. You can see it's a beautiful blue sky today. Scarcely a cloud in it, but it's very cold and windy. It doesn't feel like the 17th of May should feel. Anyway, it's too windy to go over and do my job at the neighbors today because you can't safely have a fire and burn brush when you're with this kind of wind. And I've placed a call to another person I work for there. I'm just waiting to hear back from her if she has anything going on, anything she needs done over at her place today. But in the meantime, I'm still working on this tree here. I don't know what you can see because I can't see. I got the phone turned away from me here. This is what I'm doing. This beautiful apple tree. Again, I hope you can see what I'm hoping you can see. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to tell you all a story. It came to mind this morning. I was going to I was going to do a Tin Lion music video of a song called Heart of the Night by Paco, but I was unable to do it anyway, so I wasn't able to locate I located one copy of it that wasn't actually Paco. It was somebody else who did a good job of it, but it wasn't really the same. And that song brought to mind a story, and I'm going to tell you this story now. Just a little background first. Some of you may not know this about me, but in 1982, I lived with my dad and my stepmother for a while. And my stepmother had an issue with Catholic people. And I was very Catholic. I was a very devout Catholic. The wind's picking up again. And I went to Mass every Saturday evening with my grandparents. I was 14 years old in 1982. Anyway, it's kind of a funny story, actually. When I get to the funny part, you'll know anyway. I kind of outsmarted the system for once with what I did, but prior to that, the system did get its pound of flesh from me, though. Basically, my stepmother pulled a knife on me and chased me out of the apartment onto the street and threatened to cut me into pieces if I ever darkened her doorway again, because I had put my suit on and I was on my way out to go to Mass on a Saturday night. Well, my grandparents, when I told them the story, they said, "You can't go back there. The woman's clearly insane. You have to stay here until we figure out something." Well, then this stepmother got the Children's Aid involved and told them some story. And the social worker I got was an older woman. She'd been a social worker since the 1930s with the Children's Aid. She was burnt out, didn't like teenagers, wouldn't deal with teenagers, so she labeled me incorrigible, and she had me sent to the reformatory in Kingston, where I spent 7 months, from February of 1983 until late August, early February to late August of 1983. August 28th, 1983 was the date I was released. After that, I went to my dad's place again with my stepmother. That couldn't last, and it didn't. I went on my own after that, got a job in a wire factory, 4 to midnight, and went to high school during the daytime because, of course, in the fall of '83, I started high school, grade 9. Anyway, here's the story. In the spring of '84, now as it worked at that time, you see, I turned 16 on July the 1st, 1984. But until I turned 16, I could be returned to jail at any time. And I pretty much told the Children's Aid what they could do when I left home. I basically told them, "You don't interfere with me and I won't ask you for anything." And they agreed to that. They didn't really want to be bothered with me. It was the same social worker that had locked me up that I ended up dealing with when I left home, and she basically said, "That's fine. You don't ask us for anything. We'll leave you alone, live your life," basically, and just don't come to us looking for anything. So that was fine anyway. That's what I told them I wanted, and they agreed to it. So I did room and board at places, and I worked in the wire factory, and I went to school. Anyway, in the spring of 1984, just prior to my 16th birthday, Children's Aid got in touch with me again. They said, "We're going to want you to attend a program in Smiths Falls." And I said, "I don't want to." I'm working. I can't be taking nights off to go to some program, as they wanted me to go there at night, and I said, beside that, I don't have a car. I drove. Like, I was able to drive. I've been driving cars since I was 8 years old. I've been wheeling cars around parking lots since I was 6. Sitting on my dad's lap steering cars since I was about 3. And actually driving cars on the highway and in town and stuff from the time I was 8. So I knew how to drive a car, but I didn't own a car. I was 15 years old, So I tried to get out of it that way, saying, well, how am I going to get there? I don't have a car. I can't go anyway. They said, we'll arrange a ride for you. We'll send a social worker to get you. And if you don't go, we're going to return you to jail. So that was enough incentive anyway to go. I figured taking a night off work beats going back to jail. So jail was not a nice place. I've made some videos about that too. It was a it was a bad situation anyway. A lot of awful things happened there. But here's the thing. So they sent this social worker to get me. Now, this was a young social worker. I'm sure she drew the short straw, having to come pick me up, take me to Smiths Falls. But beautiful young woman anyway, not really much older than me. She might have been about 20 years old, and I was just bordering on 16. Anyway, really, really, really pretty young lady. And I thought, well, if I have to go to this thing, at least I get to meet this woman, this pretty young woman. Not that I was so delusional as to think anything could possibly happen, but still, it's nice to fantasize. So anyway, I only met her the one time though. She came to pick me up. She took me to Smiths Falls. When I got there, anyway, I was told what classroom to go to in the high school. This thing was being held in the high school. So I go into the Smiths Falls High School. I go to this classroom, which was on the ground floor. And in I walk. And there's such a ragtag bunch of people in there. There's people with mohawk haircuts and friggin' safety pins through their bottom lips and everything else, All kids around my age, 14, 15, 16 years old. Anyway, I was told by the woman running the program just to take a seat wherever I could find one. So I sat down, and in the desk next to me, my neighbor basically, at the neighboring desk, there's this fella sitting there with the mohawk haircut and the jean jacket with the chains on it and all the rest of it, And anyway, I just nodded and said hello to him, and he nodded, kind of grunted at me, and I'm sitting there, and I didn't fit into that crowd at all. I was a pretty clean-cut young guy, and anyway, I felt like a fish out of water there, really. Anyway, the woman who was running the program, she said, I'm going to start out by handing out these surveys. I want you all to fill them out. These are anonymous surveys. We're not going to know who filled out what survey. It's just so we can get a feel for who all is here and like that. So they started handing out the surveys, but what I noticed is they would go through and they'd pull a survey out and hand it to a person. They weren't just handing them out as they come up in the pile. So that made me suspicious. And I looked, and there was a number on the upper right-hand corner of my paper. There was a number. And I'm looking at the questions on the survey, and they're all asking about drug and alcohol use and sexual activity. Have you done this? Have you done that? And so on. Do you have experience with this? And on like that. Very personal questions anyway, and the fact that they had pulled the papers out, like they were looking for a specific paper for a specific individual, and each paper had a number on it, but then that could have even been a number for that form. It might have been, this is form number such and such, and they might all have the same number in the upper corner. So I motioned to the guy beside me. I said, what's the number on your paper? And he kind of looked at me. He said, what? They handed us these little golf pencils to fill them out with, too. He kind of looked at me. He says, what? And I said, on the upper right-hand corner of your paper, I said, there should be a number. Yeah. He said, what is it? He told me. I said, that's different than the number on my paper. These are not anonymous surveys. Well, when I said that, you could hear pencils drop all over the room. People had started to fill them out, and they stopped. and the pencils all dropped. You could just hear the golf pencils hitting the wooden desktops, you know. And the woman running the program, she was furious. And she just pointed at me. She said, "You, get out." And so I go out. I'm standing out in front of the high school waiting for what seemed like a long time. Eventually, probably after an hour and a half or something, all the people started coming out of the high school, standing there waiting for their rides. You know, cars were coming, picking them up. Some of them were just walking away to wherever. And I'm standing there waiting for the pretty young social worker to come get me anyway. And like I say, I didn't have a car yet. I didn't have a car until after I got my license, which I did in December of 1984. But, you know, like I say, I had a lot of experience driving, but I didn't own a car. So anyway, this lady had come to get me. She brought me there. She had to come get me to bring me home. Now, this was supposed to be a weekly event for a couple months or something, and I wanted no part of it. So anyway, when she got there, she's all smiles and everything, you know, and I go over and wait by her car. Well, the woman running the program was out there with the crowd, and she motioned for this young lady to go over. She wanted to talk to her. I thought, oh shit, here we go, you know. So this woman's talking to the young lady, and you could see the young lady, the pretty young lady that I had a crush on, she kept looking over at me, and just with a perplexed look on her face, and looking back at the woman and nodding her head and stuff. And then she came over, she marched over to the car, she said, "Get in." Like that, I get in the car anyway. She says, "I hope you know you've ruined everything." I just shrugged my shoulders, you know. I said, "Well, look," I said, I work for a living. I don't want to be taking time off work to be dealing with this stuff." I said, "I thought I had gotten out from under all this when I agreed not to trouble you people for anything. And now you're trying to get me into some program that I want no part of, and it's going to cost me a night's wages every week. You know," I said, I don't want any part of this. I said, "You should have left me alone." So that was it. She took me home. I didn't have to go to the program anymore anyway. I was kicked out.